In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Deacon. Okay, so I asked Joe to find a copy of the book Saint Anthony by Saint Athanasius, and it's one of the classics. I think it is the sweetest and the most easy, or the easiest books of patristics that the person can start with. If we had not touched the writings of the Church Fathers, this one will be the most enjoyable of all of them. I hope that most of us read it before and ready to read it again. I would suggest that we read this for the Lent. That's a Lent suggestion. I'm going to make another suggestion. If you read this with another book that you can find online, you can find it on YouTube. It is the book called The Ascent to Mount Carmel by John of the Cross. So you got St. Anthony from our side of the world, and John of the Cross from the Catholic, the Western side. He was from Spain. And The Ascent to Mount Carmel is a classic on prayer life, and especially in contemplative prayer.
I want to,
yes.
Sorry to cut off. I wanted to make sure, I have the PDF file, but I wanted to make sure that it's the entire book before I send the link in the chat.
Sure.
I wanted to check that with you. Is it 50 pages?
I think it's 50 big pages, but if I think the small book that we bought, if it's that small cut, it will be like a 90 pages small cut.
Okay, I don't want to waste time now. I'll have to check it with the hard copy. Hard copy.
It is. Let me just say, it's 90 some paragraphs or 90 some chapters. Mm-hmm. If you read you read the number 90 at the end, then you're correct. That's the end of the book.
Okay, I don't want to send the link.
You go by numbers. You go by numbers, 1, 2, 3. So Saint Athanasius wrote it in chapters, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So to introduce it quickly, he has a first chapter written to some monks, and we would kind of have to guess who were those monks. So he wrote in it in the beginning. You asked me to write for you like a story, the life story of Anthony, and I had to do it very quickly because the time to travel in the sea is coming to an end, and I have to finish it before the travel becomes impossible and no one can deliver that book to you. So you assume he speaks from Alexandria. What sea he's talking about? It's going to be the Mediterranean. And so where would the monks be? Across the Mediterranean. I don't think they would have to go either east or west. They're going to have to go north to Europe, most probably to Greece or Italy. And I think from there, the story of St. Anthony spread across Europe and became an inspiration for the monastic communities to start everywhere. And based on that book, many of them came to Egypt and to be involved and to witness the monastic life in Egypt. Something that we should be as servants in the church. We are responsible for kids to be aware of it. At least read the book. If it's not really very difficult to read. It's not like the other patristics, especially if the translation is nice. There's Arabic translation and there's English translation. The Arabic translation is done, I think, even maybe Deacon Athanasius had done it. Deacon, the one we said, what's his name? Feltus. Deacon Joseph Feltus.
Athanasius, yeah. Oh.
Yes, Deacon Athanasius. Mm-hmm. So he had most probably had shared in doing one of the translations in Arabic. I've read it in Arabic, actually. I don't know how many of us read it. It's really, really nice. Some chapters of it is just an eye opener. And I add to this, if you have a chance during the Lent, also to go over the book by John of the Cross as the Ascent to Mount Carmel, so you can get at actually it's a why these two. So you read the story of the monk. Again, I say this is like description of how he did things and how things went with him, but you don't really go inside of the monk, although Saint Athanasius did a little bit. But to go really to dig deeper into the psychology and the mentality and the spirituality of the monk, you need a book that explains the internal struggles and the internal journey, why they do what they do, why they go into this austere life. So John of the Cross had explained this beautifully, really, very, very nice. It's called The Ascent of Mount Carmel. Thank you, Joe. Now, today I wanted to do two things, and I'm hoping that next time, maybe Deacon John can prepare something for us. I want to ask Deacon John and Deacon George to prepare topics for the servants. We need to hear their wisdom and what they are nourishing themselves with. So maybe Deacon John next time. Very good, thank you. I think it was also on YouTube. If you cannot read it, I put it on YouTube as I drive. It's read. There's many versions of it. Okay, so I have two sections today. The first section is I'm going to start with the secular part, the part that I don't want to spend much time on, but I have to do it. It's something that you need to know about. And the second part is the spiritual part, so that it becomes not a talk like in a university class or a college class. We want to get a little bit more into the spiritual too. My first talk is a continuation of what we started last time about the social issues and what's going on and how you can understand things going around, especially with the new development and the world we live in general. And it's very important that you as servants understand what's going on. One of the things that I think we seldom look into it is the idea of the social structure, and it's the social studies, they call it, and sociology is the thing that I want to talk about today. When you study sociology and you read a little bit about sociology and what it means, sociology is the study of societies, how societies are formed, what different concepts and idea the people of a certain culture use. And when you define society, it's a group of people, group of families or individuals that's gathered under certain norms, laws, and morals. So they have set of morals and expectations and norms. They might be different than other societies, but they share it. And this makes it overlaps with the word culture. So when we talk about there's different people who studied the phenomena of society and culture. One of them that seems like to come back and kind of show an influence from time to time is Karl Marx. We hear about the name a lot, but I don't know how many of us know exactly or a little bit about what he had done. Karl Marx is a very important figure, extremely important, and is going to come over and over and over and over again. And you're going to see more of his ideas and thought as time goes by. So that's what I wanted to do today, is to talk a little bit about Karl Marx, and then we go back to Egypt and pick maybe Saint Bishoya, someone that we know him very tenderly in Egypt, but we don't speak much about him. But we need to go visit the monastery tonight. Let's go to. I'm going to share with you my screen and go into Karl Marx first. So let us do this. Okay, you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I was looking into this guy, Hegel. Hegel was the philosopher that influenced Karl Marx, and he is behind the way. He's a philosopher, but it's very deep. His very deep thoughts about how to think of things.
Abu, can I just say one thing here?
Yes.
Otzek for a few times already referenced the fact that when we're reading the gospel and Jesus say, "Guard your eye," and the eye is the light of is the lamp of the body.
Mm-hmm.
You focus on the concept of the association of images and concepts.
Correct.
And this is very important in this context because everything you notice around in the world around us or see, it lands in a certain spot in the brain based on the lens with which you see things.
Correct.
So in the world we live in today, unless we understand how the world is seeing things, not all of us see things the same way.
No.
So if people have their brains formulated according to the lens of Karl Marx and these ideas, they always see things in a certain way. And people that are entrenched in the gospel and they see things the way Christ sees them, they land things they see the same vision, but it lands in different spots in their brains, basically.
That's very correct.
So that's very important for us to understand how others may think and how the world around us thinks and how we should think.
That's very true. And actually, by the way, since you said this, and I want to just add a little bit, sometimes the difference is very subtle.
That is the problem, actually. That is exactly why we should understand the lens. Because if you differentiate the lens, we were just discussing this with some people like a few hours ago. That like you know, but I'm glad we're talking about this now.
Thank you. I want to just say this because many of the ideas that people are getting excited about these days is coming from Marx's way of seeing things. He was a he's a genius, actually. But let us talk about Marx and give a little bit of his history, who he is. So as many very influential people in history, where do you expect Karl Marx to come from? What ethnic group? Give a guess.
Germany.
That's
Jewish, yeah.
Nationality, but he is Jewish.
Jewish, yeah. He had to be Jewish, yeah.
Originally.
Yeah, a lot of the
influential.
I have to be careful with this comment, the way I word it. A lot of the troubles in Christianity came from German influence.
Correct. Yeah, but he is originally a Jewish family that converted to Lutheran, and then they became Protestant. So he's German, yes, and Karl Marx was born in the 18th century, in the 19th century, 1800s. Lived in the 1800s. He's from Germany, but he had to get out of Germany because of his ideologies. When you look at him at Wikipedia, and I have the page here, if you can see it, he's a philosopher, economist, historian, sociologist, political theorist, journalist, socialist revolutionary. And he was born in Trier, that's a city in Germany. Marx studied law and philosophy in the university. And due to his political publications, that's his wife, Joanna Bertha, Marx became stateless. No country wanted him because Europe at the time was made of rich noblemen who owned businesses and they were workers under them. And you're going to see very quickly his theory was based, they call it the conflict theory. He was not the one to invent the conflict theory, but he was one of the most influential people in promoting it and actually developing it. So He lived in exile in London. He was exiled to England, London, for decades, where he continued to develop his thought in collaboration with another German thinker. His name is Engels. And they published their writing, and they wrote, mainly they stayed and spent most of the time in the reading room of the British Museum. The most significant of those is called the Communist Manifesto. It's a pamphlet. It's not a very big book. Marx's political and philosophical thought and enormous influence on subsequent intellectual, economic, and political history. He changed history. That's how significant this figure is. His name has been used as an adjective when you say Marxian or Marxian thought, and a noun and a school of social theory. The theory, there's like 4 or 5 theories for sociology. One of them is the conflict theory. And when the conflict theory comes, Karl Marx is the name behind it. He has critical theories about society, economics, and politics, collectively understood as Marxism. Marxism is the title. Hold that human societies develop through class conflict. We'll explain that a little bit more. So this is his biggest thing. It's called the conflict theory. That there's in society is built around a conflict, a fight, a competition. So in the capitalist mode of production, we're gonna look into this. I'm gonna run over this just to give you an idea about his life. All right. So let me share with you what I collected, and let me switch so I can go into the other document. The other document is a Word document. Okay. Here we go. Okay. You can see this one?
Yep.
Okay. So that's conflict theory and the Socialist Manifesto, Karl Marx. What is his version of the conflict theory? He developed it. Nobody remember exactly where did it start and who started the idea of the conflict theory, but Marx and Engels had developed it, and it became under his name. He focused on the conflict between 2 primary classes. He divided the society into 2 groups. Each class consists of a group of people bound by mutual interests and a certain degree of property ownership. So what are these 2 groups? There's all material property, money, resources, oil, gold, agricultural products, you name it. So he named them the bourgeoisie, means a group of people that represented members of society who hold the majority of the wealth and means. Statistically speaking, they found that, and that's true, is that 1% of society or 1% of people have 90% of the resources of the country, while 90% has 10% of the resources. That's what they found. It's an inverted ratio. So 1% hold 90% of and then the 99% actually hold the 10% of the resources. So bourgeoisie are the group of people, the wealthy people, the lucky people who have the major wealth and means in any society. While the other group, he called them the proletariat. The proletariat is the group that are working class or poor. Of course, they're working in the factories and the fields and the businesses of the bourgeoisie. With the rise of capitalism in Europe, first, Marx theorized that the bourgeoisie A minority within the population would use their influence to oppress the proletariat, the majority class. This way of thinking is tied to a common image associated with conflict theory. The theory also is based on this. The model of thinking about society as the conflict. They believe a pyramid arrangement in terms of how goods and services are distributed in society. That's what I said. 1% owns 90%, and the 99% owns 10% of the resources. At the top of the pyramid is a small group of elites that dictate the terms and conditions to the larger portion of society because they have an outsized amount of control over resources and power. So there is the resources, but there's also the control. Where does the control lie? In the conflict theory, the control of resources lie with the small elite bourgeoisie. Uneven distribution within society was predicted to be maintained through ideological coercion. Coercion means power to force people into certain choices. To threaten them or to force them against their best judgment or against their interest. The bourgeoisie would force acceptance of the current conditions by the proletariat. Conflict theory assumes that the elite will set up systems of laws, traditions, and other social structures in order to further support their own dominance while preventing others from joining their ranks. They will put all kinds of protection so that they would not be with them in the same power area. You can see this, and we all know this. Even the movies in Egypt spoke about it after the revolution in Egypt in the days of Nasser. You and I, we who came from Egypt, know that this is the biggest thing that the government focused on. All the movies were talking about how the bashas and the rich people were oppressing the poor people, and poor people were miserable because they couldn't have any access to control their own lives. So Marx theorized the theory that he put that as the working class and poor were subjecting to worsening conditions, a collective consciousness would raise more awareness about inequality, and this would potentially result in a revolt. Revolution must happen in a culture like that. If after the revolt conditions were adjusted to favor the concerns of the proletariat, the working class, the poor, the conflict circle would eventually repeat, but in the opposite direction. The bourgeoisie would eventually become aggressors and revolters, grasping for the return of the structure and that formally maintain their dominance. That's basically what the conflict theory says, that there is always going to be a conflict between the rich and the poor, and the rich holding the power through their money. They will push the poor to revolt. And when the poor revolt and correct that and make laws and correct the situation, the rich will go back to revolt again. We go in this cycle. What this theory assumes, there are four primary assumptions which are helpful to understand. One, there is competition, that the owner of the work and the worker are competing. The owner of the apartment building and the what do you call them? The people who rent the apartment are competing. There has to be a revolution, some kind of action against the status quo. And then you end up with structural inequality, a chaos, and then a war. That's eventually what happens. That's how a conflict theory sees things. So let's look at each of them. Competition. Conflict theorists believe that competition is a constant and at times an overwhelming factor in nearly every human relationship and interaction. By the way, Karl Marx says that there's even competition in the family. I might be wrong, but I think one of the pushes for the feminist movement was the Marxism ideas, that there is actually an inequality between men and women, and that had to lead to some kind of fight back. So competition exists as a result. So he says in the family, Men and women in a family, husband and wife, are unequal. Man owns more power than the woman, and he dictates what goes on, and he dictates how the money should be spent. So this will end up by women revolting and causing, fight back in the family, even among brothers and sisters. So he goes into this conflict theory, he goes into explaining a lot of other things and trying to form it or to mold it into this idea. Competition exists as a result of scarcity of resources, including material resources, money, property, commodities. More beyond material resources, individuals and groups within society also compete for the intangible resources as well, like the attention. When kids are competing for the attention, these can include leisure time, dominance, social status, sexual partners, etc. Conflict theorists assume that competition is the default rather than cooperation. They assume that everything is based on competition. There's always this competition. The next one is revolution. Given conflict theorists' assumption that conflict occurs between social classes, one outcome of this conflict is a revolutionary event. The idea is that change in power dynamic between groups does not happen as a result of a gradual adaptation. Rather, it comes about as a symptom of conflict between these groups. In this way, changes to a power dynamic are often abrupt and large in scale, rather than gradual and evolutionary. So what they say, because of the strangulation, because they feel like strangulated the worker group or the unprivileged, and they don't have any control over the situation, they come to a point where they have to actually revolt in a very explosive way. I remember listening to this guy I told you about last time. He was like one of the biggest heads of these ideas and these theories. Saul Linsky, if you watch the movie. And he was in an interview with a very interesting, very aggressive host. I forgot his name. He was asking him, I read in your book, if some rich man told you, I'm going to give you the car as a donation, you wrote in the book, I would steal it before he gives it to me. And he said, so why you do this? And he said, because I don't want anybody to feel like they are actually being benevolent when they give me something that I can take by myself. That's the idea. And he says, and he's saying it with a lot of enthusiasm, poor people cannot have any rights if they don't take it by their hands. So there's no place for, in the theory, they don't assume there's any place for negotiation or there's no benevolence. It's all like the fight in the forest, if you think about it. Structural inequality. An important assumption of conflict theory is that human relationships and social structures are all experience inequalities of power. In this way, some individuals and groups inherently develop more power and reward than others. Following this, those individuals and groups that benefit from a particular structure of society tend to work to maintain those structures as a way of retaining and enhancing their power. So who are in power would do everything to keep in power. They don't want to lose it. And eventually war. Conflict theorists tend to see war as either a unifier or as a cleanser of societies. In conflict theory, war is the result of cumulative and growing conflict between individuals and groups and between entire societies. In the context of war, a society may become unified in some ways. Conflict still remains between multiple societies. On the other hand, war may also result in the wholesale end of a society. It might terminate it completely. So there is special consideration to this theory. Marx viewed capitalism as part of a historical progression of economic systems. He believed capitalism was rooted in commodities or things that are purchased and sold. For example, he believed that labor is a type of a commodity, can be purchased and can be sold. We sell our time to whoever pays more. Because laborers have little control or power in the economic systems, because they don't own factories or materials, their worth can be devalued over time. It's the market idea. If you have more workers, their pay will go down. If you have more work, the labor will be valued with more money. This is the market value. This can create an imbalance between business owners and their workers, which can eventually lead to social conflicts. He believed these problems would eventually be fixed through a social and economic revolution. It has to be a revolution. Max Weber, a German sociologist, philosopher, jurist, and political economist, adopted many aspects of the Marx conflict theory and later further refined some of Marx's idea. Weber believed that conflict over property was not limited to one specific scenario. Rather, he expanded a little bit. He made it more than just property and conflict in one aspect, in one scenario. Rather, he believed that there were multiple layers of conflict existing at any given moment in every society. Whereas Marx framed his view of conflict as one between owners and workers, Weber also added an emotional component to this ideas about conflict. Weber said, it is these that underlie the power of religion and make it an important ally of the state that transform classes into status groups and do the same to the territorial communities under particular circumstances. He says the conflict might not be over money or work, might be actually our emotional attachments. So that makes one group more powerful than other, and one group has to listen to the other. That makes legitimacy a crucial focus for efforts at domination. That says people can be dominated by a group, like for example, clergy being a class who wants to dominate the lay people. Let's say a special group in a country that has nothing to do with money, but they put themselves on top of the society. And if you, especially like, for example, we saw this in Africa, where like a political party or a tribe that puts itself as a supreme group in the country might not be more rich, but they might make themselves more rich, but it's not that essentially it's not a conflict. Weber beliefs about conflict extend beyond Marx because they suggest that some forms of social interaction, including conflict, generates beliefs and solidarity between individuals and groups within society. In this way, an individual's reaction to inequality might be different depending on the groups with which they are associated, whether they perceive those in power to be legitimate, and so on. People might accept it, and they might actually reject it. Conflict theorists for the later 20th and 21st centuries have continued to extend conflict theory beyond the strict economic classes posted by Marx. Although economic relations remain a core feature, the most important of the inequalities across groups in the various branches of conflict theory. Conflict theory is highly influential in modern and postmodern theories of sexual and racial inequality, peace and conflict studies, and the many varieties of identity studies that have arisen across Western academia in the past several decades. We'll take examples so that's not only theory. For example, conflict theorists view the relationship between a housing complex owner and a tenant as being based mainly on a conflict instead of a balance or harmony. It's not a cooperation. There's not a common goal that they both are working for. No, in fact, it is a competition. You see, that's the difference. In conflict theory, there is no common goal. There's no common ground. Everybody has their own interest, and that's it. And the interests are conflicting. Even though there may be more harmony than conflict, but they still see that as a conflict. They believe that they are defined by getting whatever resources they can get from each other. In the above example, for the owner of the house and the tenants, some of the limited resources which may contribute to the conflict between tenants and the complex owner include the limited space within the complex, the limited number of units, the money which tenants pay to the complex owner for rent, and so on. These are all resources. And if they are competing, each of them will try to get the best out of it. Ultimately, conflict theorists see this dynamic as one of conflict over these resources. The complex owner, for example, however gracious he is fundamentally focused on getting as many apartment units filled as possible so he can make as much money in rent as possible, especially if bills such as mortgages and utilities must be covered. This may introduce conflict between housing complexes among tenant applicants looking to move into an apartment and so forth. On the other side of the conflict, the tenants themselves are looking to get the best apartment possible for the least amount of money in the rent. They looked at something happened recently. So the conflict theorists point to the financial crisis of 2008 and the subsequent bank bailouts. And look at this. This is interesting, actually, where this theory actually hit the mark in this one. As a good example of real-life conflict theory, according to authors Alan Sears and James Cairns, I think those wrote about the bailouts on the financial crash that happened in 2008. This view of the financial crisis as the inevitable outcome of the inequalities and instabilities of the global economical system, which enables the largest banks and institutions to avoid government oversight and take huge risks that only reward a select few. So note that the large banks and big businesses subsequently received bailouts, funds from the same governments that claim to have insufficient funds for large-scale social programs such as universal health care. This dichotomy supports a fundamental assumption of conflict theory, which is that mainstream political institutions and cultural practices favor dominant groups and individuals. Rich people are supported by the government, while poor people are not much supported. It happens. It's actually, it's more common than we think. This example illustrates that conflict can be inherent in all types of relationships, including those that don't appear on the surface to be antagonistic. It also shows that even a straightforward scenario can lead to multiple layers of conflict. Conflict theory had a profound influence on the 19th and the 20th century thought and continues to influence political debates to this day. Some questions. Is there any criticism to this theory? Yes, of course. One common criticism of the conflict theory is that it fails to capture the way in which economic interactions can be mutually beneficial to the different classes involved. For example, conflict theory describes the relationship between employers and employees as one of conflict, in which the employees wish to pay as little as possible. The employers wish to pay as little as possible for the employees' labor, while the employees wish to maximize their wages. In practice, however, employees and employers often have a harmonious relationship. Moreover, institutions such as pension plans and stock-based compensations can further blur the boundary between workers and corporations by giving workers an additional stake in the success of their employers. I've seen this in Boston, actually. Some pizza owners, if you think about this in a small scale, their businesses are very successful. And the key to that is that they actually partnershiped with their workers in some way or another. And in a capitalist country like this, you would see this more often, especially in small businesses, maybe on even large businesses. And I know many companies are trying to do this now, is to give stocks of the company to the employees if they make progression. So they become partially owners of the company. So there is some weaknesses to this. And if the ideology of the people that work is different. So it doesn't have to end up always in a competition, and it doesn't have to always end up in a fight and a conflict. What I saw this theory pushing for, maybe let me just ask around and see what you think of what we said, and let's just get a little bit of discussion, maybe 10 minutes of discussion about this, and see what you think of this theory and why is this theory. And let's start with this question: what is common between this theory, from just a general view, and the biblical or the Christian way of thought, of thinking? What's the same? What's similar? We'll just say what's similar, what's different, and start there.
I want to. The first thing about this theory is that, as Utsik said, it assumes what we call a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
So in biological systems and economical systems and all these systems, there is something called symbiosis, where two seemingly conflicting interests cannot function without one another.
Correct.
A student goes to college. He can never learn without a teacher. So you can say that the professors are in conflict with the students, but if the students have no teachers, they have no learning. And same thing, the professors need students in order to get paid their salaries. So the theory is weak in that sense, is that everything in society is a zero-sum game. The second thing is that Marx was an economic theorist, not a politician. So he, as any theoretician of any subject, the theory is not necessarily 100% correct or practical. But politicians usually take a theory that's, have some appealing features, and they try to run away with it. And that's what happened with his stuff. Like he was just describing how societies evolve through conflicts. And the third thing is that it ignores the whole issue of sin from the very beginning, because in the garden, Abel and Cain had the whole world. They didn't have to compete over anything whatsoever. But one of them killed the other. And, Pharaoh, you could claim that he was in conflict with his people. And he, when there was famine in the land, he took their land. Abraham, if we go according to this theory, you have to, and we think that people should hate any dominant class, you would have to hate Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and every character in the Old Testament and in the New, probably. And the fourth item that is actually makes a lot of people hate Christianity, Marxists, is what Paul and Peter taught in their epistles. And Paul was a very poor person. He was very rich originally, but he became very poor for the sake of Christ. But he encouraged women to be submissive to their husbands. And he encouraged the slaves to serve their masters, even the evil ones, well. And people forget that he also encouraged the husbands to be kind and the masters to be gentle. But they say they wish for a Paul that would have asked the slaves to revolt against the masters and to start a revolution. And here is where Christianity totally differs from this. And I'm going to leave it at that so people just, see how it works.
Yeah, I think you just summarized the thing that I wanted people to look at and say what is similar and what's not similar. So he hates, I think conflict theory is giving us the picture of the oppression that the strong can have for the weak, the rich can have for the poor.
But the question is, why wouldn't Paul, who was by all standards a revolutionary? Paul was a revolutionary. He changed the whole world.
Why didn't go for the liberation of the...
Christ was a revolutionary too.
Mm-hmm.
And he went against the ruling classes. He didn't care if the person was called Pilate or Caesar or Caiaphas.
Yes.
But
he didn't lead a riot against them.
Yeah, but that is the question. And I want people to think about it. Why? Why not?
We had that question actually in Sunday school. They tell me the high school class had this question. Why did Christianity not start?
Did Christianity not fight for the rights of the poor? As a matter of fact, here is one one annoying feature. When they told Jesus that the ointment could have been sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor, he said, the poor will always be with you.
Mm-hmm.
Although Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. So why wouldn't Christianity defend, why wouldn't Christianity necessarily defend the poor over the rich, or the black people over the police, or whatever? Because it's the same thing. Why wouldn't Christianity defend the crushed class against the ruling class? That is a very important question. Or does it?
I think Christianity and the commandment of the Lord wants it to come from out of love, right? So Christ wants us to sell what we have and give to the poor. He wants us, there is a conflict between earthly and heavenly, where he wants us to focus on the heavenly. He wants those who have can give to the poor out of love, and then the poor would love back those who are rich. So it wants to arrive there, but without being forced. It can't be forced.
This is I guess absolutely right, because I think I saw Denzel Washington, and somebody asking him a question about equality. He said, "Listen, the laws can tell you to do whatever you want to do, but they can never force you to love one another.
That's beautiful.
And unless you're waiting to change society by one loving the other, that is not going to come from the laws. You can fill the books with laws. And conflict theory would never lead to love or actually peace."
So there are these countries. I don't know if you see the map. Do you see the map? Yeah.
And by the way, today's colleges, conflict theory is taught under the title critical theory now. It's called critical theory. You get to be critical of everything you look at, and everybody who offers you anything, and everybody who talks to you, every sentence they say. You go to church, you hear a message, you have to be critical of basically the motives behind everything people say, which drives people to be actually paranoid and nuts.
Yes. Yes, there is nothing taken as benevolent or good. These are the countries that actually are following the Marxist-Lenin theory. Basically, Lenin was the political, like Deacon John said, the political figure that actually embraced the Marxist ideas to the core. And in his time, they killed the Tsar and all the rich class in Russia, and they converted the whole country into the socialist structure, on the communist structure actually. So you have Russia and China, and you exclude a little bit of Japan here, India, and then you have Ethiopia. It's a big chunk, believe it or not. Ethiopia, Madagascar. I don't know what these are in Africa, and you have Cuba. So these are all communist cultures and communist ruled places. I do believe that Russia is retreating from that. They saw the problem with the Marxist theory, how the people lost interest in producing things. They lost interest in doing anything. Became a problem over there because the government was the one to push for everything to be done. There was no ambition in a way. So this is what happens, and this is what so like you said, and I think this is the problem. I think this is where we're going to have a problem. The problem with this conflict theory or the critical theory is that you look at any authority with suspicion, and you want to bring that authority down.
Children should look at their parents with suspicion, according to theory.
Yes, husbands and wives the same way. Wives should look at husbands.
Exactly.
What's he trying to take advantage of me of? You know, where is he going to take advantage of me?
And it violates the basic principle of the gospel, which one, you should deny yourself, carry your cross every day, and sacrifice for the other. I mean, the gospel is the anti-conflict.
Yes, but there's common with the there's something common with the theory is that in the first they say that the first church was a socialist in a way. What happened in the first church?
It was, but here's the problem.
Yes,
Marcus was not advocating for socialism. He was describing how the world functions. Politicians took it afterwards, said, okay, let's do it socialist so basically demolish the ruling class today and uplift the crushed classes.
So we prevent war. That's what they wanted to do.
Prevent war for a period of time until the crushed classes rise again. And that's what happened in Russia. The church did it from a different perspective entirely, out of love.
Of course.
And that works. That works. Out of love works. Barnabas was a very wealthy person. He
Mhm.
sold his fields and put it at the feet of the apostles and went preaching the gospel around the world. And in order to reach, to be the anti-conflict and give everything away, you have to love your neighbor, sacrifice, and believe in eternal life. And here is the biggest issue with Marxism in my mind personally. If the world has no God and has no eternal life, what is my incentive whatsoever to sacrifice for someone else?
No
To
incentive.
let the conflict rage and let me be on top at the end of it.
Yeah.
That should be everybody's creed if there is no reward in heaven afterwards.
Right.
People ask me, they say that the white man destroyed the red Indian, and I say, so what's wrong with that? They say there was no love. I say, let's leave love aside, because love only arrives on the scene if you believe in the gospel.
Correct.
But if you want me to believe that I came out of a monkey, I would do what animals do. When did a lion ever have compassion over a deer?
No.
When he wanted to eat, he found a deer, he ate it, and nobody
That's
blamed him. Everybody,
as much compassion you have with an apple.
exactly. That's right. So we have compassion, we Christians. So if you're gonna take away my Christianity away from me, that's what I'm addressing today's society. If you're gonna take away my gospel away from me, don't blame me if I act with no compassion at all towards everybody around.
That's true. That's very true. I want to hear what people have to say. Because some sounds very, because I want to tell you something about this, because it seems very appealing. This is, if we watch the movie Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, they say the Catholic Church in Chicago, where some people were very excited about Linsky. He has the same ideas. He was called the community organizer, the father of community organization. So they were excited because he said he made results, very quick results, that poor people in poor areas all of a sudden became in control of their lives immediately. What he did is went there and he taught them how to fight the systems, to make trouble, to protest all the things that the government is doing in their place, and to take over the seats for the local areas, which seemed very beautiful. And then many priests in the Catholic Church followed him, and they said, this is like immediate results. We don't have to do much. The poor will rise and do things for themselves. So what's wrong with that? Knock off the systems, the tyrant systems that is on top of them, and bring them to power, and they will take care of themselves. What's wrong with that? That's exactly what happened in Russia in the time of the Tsar. And he would say, no one in power in the town or in the county will give you any spaces in the ruling hall.
The answer to Saul Alinsky is that Chicago is the most murderous city in America today. And actually, all the murders are happening in its inner city among its own population. It's not the rich killing the poor. It is the locals killing one another.
That's exactly it. He put in power people that actually did not care for others. It was not a proof what is it? A proof or a theory to support good winning. It was actually giving power to somebody who didn't know what to do with it. And instead of educating people to how to make good choices and to make progress and help them to achieve and to advance and to organize themselves, he wanted them to take power. That was the goal. So the goal is to take over power and decide whatever they do with it. What ended up happening is that they actually took advantage of power. It was not a very good situation. And just between you and me, this is exactly what we heard in Egypt when the so-called Arab Spring started. It's exactly the same ideology. Knock off all those tyrants on top of the Arab countries and let people decide what they need to do with power. And I don't know, God knows when the effects of that stuff happened will end or will last. I think we can go on into politics. We don't need to do this, but I wanted us to go into the ideology of Karl Marx and how it is actually infiltrating, and it's very appealing, extremely appealing. But it shifts, like Deacon John said, shift our thinking from the gospel to politics and to how to control people and how to give more power to a group of people to rise against another group of people. And neither Jesus nor St. Paul nor any of the apostles were interested in that at all, because that's how not you change. And a word that you said from Denzel, it's very nice. He said you can put laws and you can give people more places in the parliament and you can give more people power into their life. They're in every country into a democratic, absolute democracy. But can that change people from within?
I think it's very important for a Christian to understand it's an insult to Christ to think of any societal theory that can fix society other than the gospel.
Yeah.
Because the price of the gospel was the blood of the Son of God. And if there was any other possibility to fix the world, he would not have died.
Right.
So the fact that he died and we still search for other approaches to fix things with Band-Aid, this is like after people discovered, heart surgery, you start to use like medieval technology of fixing heart issues, It's like
right.
We're given a totally different approach, as Mina said. Like the apostles wanted it to be done, but with a totally different technology.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, enough with Marx. I hope that anybody wants to say something or to make a comment on this. Okay, we can move. I just want to, like 5 minutes so that we don't leave on the note of Karl Marx and socialism and communist and all that stuff. And want to just talk about today, I talked to the kids about Saint Bishoy. We're moving like from left to right, from the extreme to the extreme. Saint Bishoy. The story of Saint Bishoy is simple. I'm not going to say you all know this Saint Bishoy story. He was a sickly, weak young man who his mother did what Saint Hannah, the mother of Samuel, did, and she offered him to serve God, and he became a monk at young age. And he was very interested. The whole point is interest in prayer. When we think about prayer and how we teach our kids to pray, we need to go a little bit more deeper and more practical. That's what I want to say. When we talk about practical, a story of Saint Bishoy, tying his hair, and many monks used to do this, not only him. And he used to have long hair, and you go to the cell of Saint Bishoy. I'm not sure if I can have an image to his cell. Here it is. We just share this with you. You see it? You see Saint Bishoy?
Yes, Imam.
Okay, so this is the cell that Saint Bishoy had. Today it's in the Saint Bishoy Monastery or Syrian, I forgot which one. So you have here like a big long rope coming from the top down, and they said that Saint Bishoy used to hang his hair or tie his hair to that rope so he doesn't fall asleep. When he falls asleep, it will pull his hair and he will wake up. Like he has his own personal alarm system. So what is the point? The point is I'm very sure he enjoyed praying. He is just totally into it. He bought into prayer. That's the cell today. he bought into prayer. It was not something that he did it by force or something that he forced himself all the time to do. And I I want us to remember this when you talk to kids about prayer. You need to teach them also the quality of prayer, not just the amount or the words, especially for middle and high school. They need to learn from us how to pray. It's important. There is a quality to prayer. That's not just the words and what we say and what choices we make, but the quality. Um, so I believe the reason why people don't um, develop that quality is they have the wrong idea about prayer, the wrong perception. And I hope the books of St. Anthony and St. John of the Cross will help in that. But let me just give you 2 cents, what I think I know. So in prayer, uh, we have to have certain intensity of prayer. And this comes by a push from us through a dark alley or a dark hole. We're trying to speak to the invisible, and there is a certain pressure that comes with it. So I tell the kids something like this, and I tell them, okay, so there's two types of work, two types of activities, you can say. A leisure activity, which we enjoy much, say, for example, going to the beach or walking on a park or by a lake on a spring day. Um, it's what we call that leisure. There's nothing happens in the leisure that we exert a lot of effort. It's enjoyable. It's something we like to do, and we immerse ourselves in it. But to get to that place, we have to work. So we drive. If we're going to go to the beach, we prepare some food. We put gas in the car. We ride, and we take some time to drive. Then we arrive there. That push we do in the beginning is almost a must for us to arrive at the leisure place. So sometimes we ask, is prayer work or leisure? If prayer is work, only work, nobody will be able to continue doing it. No one would hang his hair from the roof just to continue working for no good reason. No, we don't. This is not in our nature to work for nothing. So there has to be some kind of reward in it. And in the Gospels, Jesus speaks about prayer as happening in the night, against a closed door, where we push and knock and ask, and there's a lot of paper in it. But eventually, the door is open, and we get some food. And then once we get this is enjoyable. But there is a certain image of prayer. So I said to the kids, and I think we should teach them that also by our example. So instead of praying and saying, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," no, we say it this way: "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come." There is energy that has to come with the prayer, and it comes from the heart. And not just I'm straining in vain. I'm looking in to get God. I'm looking to grab him, to grab his attention at least, to make him hear me. So that the image of the judge with the widow, he says, I am tired of this woman who comes and just keeps tugging at me all the time. This tug has to happen. And first, they need to see it in our own prayers. No servant should pray in a monotonous way. No servant should pray by just reciting words as if he's talking to himself or making an act of or a show of prayer. A true servant of God to be like Christ, praying with energy, with enthusiasm, praying in expectation to be given, praying in expectation of an answer, that something will happen. So we go into this dark alley, into a closed door, and we knock. And that knocking should be heard by everybody in the class, whether you are on Zoom or in the class. We teach first by us praying this way. We don't teach them by words. When we come to do it, they see totally something different. They will forget about it. completely. Whatever you teach them, unless it's not practiced and seen, I don't think they will get anything from what you're saying. So let's pray with energy. I had a Protestant friend who used to make that comment. They know how to pray. They know how to. So he said, watch any Copt when they say Our Father, they immediately yawn. And I said, you're right. Because we just got used to the words and we do it automatically, and that there's no energy in it. I don't expect anything. It's work. To me, it's work. I'm going to do it either dead or alive, asleep or awake. But if I'm expecting something from God, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it good, that everyone will feel if I'm praying with people that they are praying to with me. And we are talking to God, a living God who will be able to respond. Because pray to your Father in heaven, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. There is a reward. There's something coming. It's not all work. There is leisure. There's something to be given from heaven. Saint Bishoya is one of the people that spoke about this, and many others. To tie one's hair by the ceiling is to wait for a reward that's so enjoyable. It's worth the watching. It's worth to stay up late. It's worth to tie our head and be pulled from it. I just wanted to share that with you, and also ask you to help your kids, whether they're in middle school or high school, even kindergarten, even as the youngest kindergarten, to see what quality of prayer you give, to see that your hearts and your energy is in it, so that you fulfill the commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and also with all your power, might, energy. Okay. So Deacon John, please, can you prepare something for us next month?
Any ideas on which direction?
If you want to go on with one more social topic, it's fine. If you want to change,
I'm not gonna do social topics unless people are willing to talk.
Yeah.
Because these things, people have ideas in their hearts, and unless they bring them to the surface, at least they should use Karl Marx's dialectic, which is put ideas in conflict of one another. To reach a better resolution, at least.
Yeah.
So people.
I hope they don't see the clergy of the church as trying to.
Even if they do, it's okay as long as they voice it. See, the problem when people don't talk. And I think it's a good meeting would involve more talking.
I agree. Maybe we're not holding a good meeting, I guess.
No, and in person is different from a Zoom. I think people shy away from talking behind the screen, I guess.
Maybe. I thought wasn't public would be the problem.
Abuna, why don't we do like a discussion group and split into different groups and open this topic or any other social topic for discussion?
Sure. You want to continue?
Yeah, like workshop, Abuna. It was great when we're doing it in a church.
So you want to talk about this next time again, or
open it for discussion? How can we use it, and how can we? Because sometimes,
deal with it.
Sometimes the kids are used to use it for every aspect of their life, and we cannot just say, "Hey, come to the church and stop and leave it outside," but use it wisely that it will lead you to God, not just away from Him, because the rules and laws that we use are man-made, and it is what drives us where we want to go. I think how to deal with it, how to discuss it with the kids, and what do we feel about it personally, and how can we?
Okay, Deacon John, you got it. So
okay.
Yeah, and I think maybe we can expand on the topic a little bit. The social push, but also the liberal push, because I think we suffer through that. It's very clear that educational institutions, whether in high school or in colleges, there is this push for this liberal package, which includes the social, but also like the homosexuality and other things.
It is all actually the same thing. It's like once you get into the complete critical theory of intersectionality, everything is a fair game. There is no rules, there is no God, and it's group ideas versus group ideas, and that is the whole thing. And so if we do not understand how to think about that stuff and discuss it with our children, and I thought I was done with that already. My kids are grown, so, but I have grandchildren now, which is creating a problem for me. So it's like,
Yeah.
Deacon John, Joe here. Do we have 30 seconds? So when I was just going to give
Sure.
my thoughts on topic for Deacon John.
Sure.
Deacon John, we're struggling in high school with the general topic of relativism. That's a huge topic, of course, and it serves as a huge umbrella for our modern day deception. You know, like with Lenin in 1917,
yeah.
Communism was the huge deception of Satan. I think maybe we're out of communism, but the huge modern day deception now is relativism, and it serves as an umbrella to the points that you mentioned earlier about slavery, about inclusion, about political correctness, and how we've modified the definition of minority and inclusion to include all kinds of sins, homosexuality and others being them. So you're a minority if you're homosexual. So we're struggling with a lot of these issues, and kids have really bought into the relativistic ideas, and that's so dangerous.
Absolutely, it breaks my heart when I see people think like this, because they are so blinded deliberately.
Yeah.
By
Yes.
I was for once we can do that next time. I saw an example.
No, it's up to you. I was
absolutely.
just telling you what we're struggling with.
This topic is very near to my heart right now. You know, but I'm involved with a lot of parts of it, because I saw, for instance, in a good part of the most liberal universities now, your admission to college does not require SAT exams or any exams of any nature in order to equalize everybody.
Right.
But now my daughter is an admissions officer for Berkeley University. Okay.
Yep.
So now I ask her, you have been recruited to do that for Berkeley, which means they certified you liberal. You know, how is that working? Like, are you taking all the people that the dumbest kids on the planet that cannot write their name and putting them in Berkeley? She said, no, of course not. It's a hoax. So kids have to understand this. It's actually by removing the standardized testing, it is not helping the minorities. They are putting them through actually a reference system. They have to be certified and given amazing references by somebody else, which is actually, so it's all society cheating on these little kids, you know, the high schoolers and the college kids, and destroying them in the process.
Yeah, and also it's a thought process that leads obviously to direct attacks on the Bible, not only in terms of homosexuality,
absolutely,
but exactly what you said earlier is that they feel the Bible condoned, and St. Paul condoned slavery and encouraged it, and they don't really understand the concept of what the word even means biblically. They think it's like the slavery that existed in the United States. It's not at all, actually. And
there is a verse, and I think Mark found that verse.
Yeah.
Is Mark there?
Mark Atif? No.
Is he here?
I don't think so.
So he found this verse in Deuteronomy where he says, anyone who steals a man, steals means rob, take a man for the purpose of selling him as a slave should be put to death.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But there's a lot of things being ignored, and they pull the wool over these kids' eyes and destroy them in the process. Yeah. One of things, like I have friends, black friends that come from Africa, and say, you the guys are supposed to be paying for these crimes because you're the ones who captured them and sold them.
Yeah.
The Western African tribes, the strong tribes in Africa, are the ones that captured the slaves and sold them to the white people.
Yeah.
So and we're Egyptians. We're none of the above, so
Yeah.
we don't really care.
Yeah. Well,
like we're not part of the story.
And the other
yeah.
thing, the really sad part of this relativistic deception, you also alluded to it in some other meeting. They really feel, these kids, at the end of the day, that I'm more compassionate than God. I have compassion on people.
Exactly.
And you don't. And you're a hater of people. And that's exactly the same concept that Karl Marx had.
That's the
the
same
poor
concept that Cain had. Cain killed Abel.
Yeah.
You know what, Cain? Cain was a vegetarian, and Cain refused to kill animals.
Yeah.
He thought that God is so cruel because he demanded a sacrifice of a killed animal.
Yeah.
He refused to kill an animal. He ended up killing his own brother.
Yeah.
That shows you that
Yeah.
how fake that compassion is.
Yeah.
They become so compassionate in theory when they themselves face like basically any hardship. They have no compassion at all.
Yep. So it's you see, as we move through the ages, the deception is clothed very differently by Satan. Either you live in heaven or you live in hell.
Absolutely.
And the moment you get away from Christ or live a life outside of the standard of the Bible, you live in hell. You're going to wind up living in hell. No one likes to hear that, but life is, you see it in history, in modern days or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's a different deception clothed. It looks so beautiful, and it looks like I'm doing society good, and that's the way Satan works. He makes it look pretty, and you know, admirable and honest and everything, but it's really a life of hell, and they don't see that. They don't
People
like
forget that Jesus was killed on a cross under what the world called Pax Romana, which was considered to be the most just rule of all times. Like after Pharaohs and after the Babylonians and Assyrians and the Greeks and the Persians, Romans were supposed to be the people of justice.
Yeah.
Nobody would be killed unless Caesar approved of it, and he was tried in a court and with witnesses and all that. And they killed the most innocent son of God under Pax Romana, which means society, no matter how hard it tries, it will fail.
Yeah.
And the only thing that succeeded in history was Christianity. And the world was healed by Christianity for over 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years of complete healing to a lot of the problems of the world.
Yeah.
And then by the 19th century, the world started turning away from Christianity and the problems started coming back again. And people don't understand this. They don't understand you can't fix society by hand.
So exactly. So anyway, I want to stop here, but I was just telling you what our struggles are, and this is a very, very hot and heated and tough discussion to have with young people in general. And really, it's not one or two people; it's like everybody.
I fully understand.
And they think you're at the end of the day, you are not Christian. You're a hater of people. You hate people, and they just don't understand the concept of separating sinner and sinner. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
The issue will be actually watered down as you go out and work. We get away from the colleges and the schools that you learn in. That's the whole thing. Once they go into the world and they have their own stuff to deal with and families and kids, and then it will become watered out, but after they have been dragged away.
Yes, exactly.
They will not care much about it, but they will
That's
be so
good to hear.
much out. No, but they are not going to be very warm.
I've seen people, and Abuna knows people he knows them very closely. People that I know a guy that was dating a girl and she was in the church and he was Christian, but he said, like, I think a Coptic church is a cultural curiosity, you know, because like we all like should be. And then she said no to him, and then ultimately he married a girl and ultimately ended up being atheist. And after she left him and cheated with somebody else and ultimately got a divorce and stuff like that, he started now to understand and he came to church and returned them. And people, but as you said, Joe, the Abuna said they come a full circle after a long journey outside. But we're Rabbana, yani God help us to help these people avoid that kind of trap.
Yeah,
Because
I
the
mean,
trap is-
we had a big discussion, and I don't want to, but this is like, I've been so sad about this for a while. The interpretations, just look at how these kids are brainwashed. The interpretation of, for example, Sodom and Gomorrah, I thought someone was joking at first when they said it. We were talking about the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they said, no, Uncle Joe, you got it all wrong. The main sin of Sodom and Gomorrah and the
lack
sin,
of hospitality.
no, rape. Everything is rape.
Oh,
Everything it has become rape. Of course, rape is wrong. We know that, but it's not homosexuality. The real problem of Sodom and Gomorrah was rape.
Yeah.
The real problem of the concubine in Second Kings and the servant was rape. You know, like, it wasn't issues related to homosexuality and things of that sort.
One of the most important approaches to these topics in general, I discovered, is not to approach it from the Bible, actually. So we don't use the Bible as a weapon. Instead, understand the Bible very well, and then look, as St. Paul said in First Romans, answers from nature to the question.
Yeah.
Because then you can answer almost an atheist with atheistic logic. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, because when you use the Bible, they start to hate you and your Bible together.
Yeah.
But if you use logic, if people don't want to argue logically, then there's no room for any discussion at all.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a topic. Maybe
Yeah.
it would be great, but if it's big, it's a big topic.
Yeah, yeah. So pray for me that God will give me some insight.
Just so we know how to deal with
Yeah.
it, and other servants become aware of
Absolutely.
strategies, I guess, in
The
addressing.
strategies of how to address it.
Yes, that's
Yes.
what we need.
Yeah.
We need to discuss,
Yeah.
not whether
Absolutely.
it's right or wrong, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
strategies.
No,
in addressing.
I have been involved with that stuff for a long time right now. Like, because seeing the generation, like my daughter's, like Angela's friends, and
Yeah.
the conflicts they go into, because some of them are really Christian and they have other friends, and it creates havoc in their even in their a cappella groups and singing groups and Christian groups and everything, because there is always a conflict somewhere.
Yeah.
But God give us wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Prayer, everybody. We need to pray. This is times for prayers.
Absolutely.
It's not a time to abandon prayer. It's actually the time to go to prayer.
A prayer does miracles.
Yes.
Yep.
It does miracles in people's hearts.
Yeah. And then in the liturgy, when we come to liturgy, this is the best time. This is a golden opportunity that we stand and lift our hearts as we lift our voices.
It works.
Yeah. Let's say
I can testify to that.
Make us worthy, O Lord, say thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the love of God the Father and grace of His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Peace be with you.